so much, everyone. It's really wonderful to be in the presence of so many friends, and I feel that you're all my friends and all my family and all my tribe. It's such an honor and a privilege to share with you tonight. And I'd just like to start by just opening with a little prayer. So just would like to invite into the space Madrecita Ayahuasca. I just honor you and I thank you. I thank you for the healing that you're bringing to this community, Madrecita Ayahuasca. And I just call upon you to be with us tonight. And I call upon our guardians and our ancestors. I ask my guardians and my ancestors and my guides to allow me to be a hollow bone, to allow this transmission to flow through me tonight. And I call upon the guardians of each direction. And I call upon our plant teachers, Santa Maria, Iboga, La Pastora, Wachuma, and all the plants, Trikuna, Chalibonga, all our beautiful plant teachers that we're working with in this community. And I ask them to bless us, to guide us, and to be with us in this space tonight. Oh. Thank you. All right, so... So what I'm sharing with you comes from a very vulnerable space. It's a message that's just landed in me very deeply. And I feel like it's a transmission for this community. So I'm going to do my best to convey it to you as clearly as I can. And it's a bit of my story. It's a bit of my experiences. And I must first of all just start by emphasizing that there's really nothing special about me. And like you, I'm human, and like you, I'm making so many mistakes. But I'm hoping that I can share some of my journey with you that will help you on your path too. Samsara, life is suffering. And from the moment we're born, we enter the cycle of life and death, creation and destruction, consumption and decay. A material reality where the ultimate destination of all things in this reality is entropy. And we're not separate from nature, but we're intrinsically part of her. And as human beings, we're very poor at being. But the truth is that the more I work with plant medicines, I've come to realize that nature is not something separate to us. In fact, it's actually an entity, and that we've signed up to be part of this experience, to be part of her. And yet we resist so strongly the experience of being. And we forget what it is we're made of. We forget that we come into this world covered in blood, and so too shall we return. And that we're made of this organic material. And we resist this experience, and we try to block it out. And we forget that our ultimate destination is actually death. And so it was I came into this world, and from a very, very young age, I felt the pain of what it was to be human, and the pain of the distraction that has been taking place for so long on this planet. And I felt the pain of our polluted oceans, our polluted skies, our polluted soil, our dying fauna and flora, and I felt so completely overwhelmed. I felt such incredible despair at the age of 8 even. I could feel it. And I could feel the urgency of our overheating planet. And I felt completely incapacitated. And I hated the fact that I was human and that I was part of a species that was responsible for this destruction. And so was added the first layer of my depression. And then at a very young age, and this would continue for most of my teenage years, I experienced extreme cruelty and abuse. And as a result of the cruelty and abuse, I experienced self-loathing and shame. And so was added the next layer of my depression. And because of the pain and anger that I was feeling, I chose to become a victim. And out of my own anger and pain, I chose to try to kill myself. There were numerous very dangerous suicide attempts, and I developed a number of very complex strategies for self-harm, ranging from toxic relationships to reckless behavior to self-degrading attempts at seeking the love and affirmation that I'd never received as a child. And so was added another layer of my depression. And as a consequence of my bad behavior, an identity was formed. And I started to give myself various labels. I believed that I was fucked up, that I was different, that I was broken, that I was damaged goods. And other people gave me these labels too, and I chose to own them. And so yet another layer of my depression was added. And the truth is that I'm none of these things. I wasn't any of these things, and I'm none of these things. But at the age of 16, I was diagnosed with clinical depression. I didn't even know what it was. But I was soon put on my first course of antidepressants, which at the time was our good old friend Prozac. Within 3 months, the dose was tripled. And so began my journey with psychiatry, which would then span 22 years. I was diagnosed with drug-resistant depression, institutionalized 5 times. And by the age of 38, I was now at the point that my body had taken so much strain that I was extremely physically ill. And at this point, I was no longer able to be on these toxic drugs. At one point, I'd reached 122 kilos. I'd lost my hair 5 times. And at this point of being so extremely physically ill, I came to ayahuasca by chance. There was a Native American Indian shaman who just happened to be in the country. And I came to ayahuasca out of desperation, out of having nothing really better to do, and because I thought, well, it might just kill me. And something in me wanted to die. And the truth is that something did. And so it was that I encountered ayahuasca. And it wasn't quite the experience that I'd expected. I came to ayahuasca thinking that this would be a bit like LSD. Well, it wasn't. And what it was actually quite horrendous, I have to be honest, because I went into that experience thinking, well, it's either going to be like LSD or maybe I'm going to have some sort of healing experience. Well, what happened was I had to face my death over and over and over again. It was like going through hell on meat hooks while facing ayahuasca in a boxing ring. And at the end of it, I thought, well, what on earth have I just done to myself? In fact, I walked out of that ceremony, and everyone I encountered, I said to them, how was it for you? And they were like, oh, it was so beautiful. Yeah. And I just wanted to punch them in the face. And I was like, did you just take the same shit? Because I don't know what I was. You just talking about that was it. And I thought, what on earth have I just done to myself? But the amazing thing was I walked out of that ceremony free of 22 years of clinical depression. And there was still a lot of work and healing ahead of me, don't get me wrong, but the shackles of depression had lifted. It's a number of years later, and I went through a lot of self-work, and I'm at the point now where I can honestly say that I'm thriving. It's been an absolutely incredible journey. I've had the privilege of meeting some of the most incredible people in the world, people who I can say are my heroes. I can say I'm incredibly blessed. I've created the life beyond my expectations. Life I just can't even begin to tell you. It's so beautiful. I've really created the life that I want to live. And every moment is just filled with awe and wonder and gratitude. And I am so completely humbled by this. So thank you, ayahuasca. The life before ayahuasca, in fact, the day before ayahuasca, and all those years before, I look back, it was as though my life was a black and white movie, and I was an actress in this movie. And I find it very hard to relate to that person who was acting in that movie. And I've really thought very hard about this. In fact, I've even spoken to psychologists about that, because studying psychology myself, I've had to question the possibility that this could be something known as dissociation. I don't know if any of you know about dissociation. Dissociation happens when, due to extreme trauma, you dissociate, you cut off part of yourself, and you can't relate to that previous version or previous events. So I've had to really question this seriously to make sure that, is it dissociation I'm experiencing, because I just can't relate to that previous version of myself. But I don't believe it is. And the reason for that, there's several reasons for that. So the first reason why I don't believe it's dissociation is because if it was dissociation, I wouldn't have a memory of what took place. And the few years before ayahuasca, and there were quite a few years before ayahuasca, it wasn't that I was in a particularly traumatic place. I was just simply depressed. I was in the cycle of depression that I was used to. So it wasn't that I was going through a traumatic time. And in addition to that, it wasn't that the ayahuasca experience itself was particularly traumatic. Yes, it was very difficult. But it was difficult because I made it difficult, because I didn't have the tools to surrender. And so, yes, I went into ayahuasca, into the boxing ring with ayahuasca, but because I resisted, and that's why it was so difficult. And another reason why I don't believe it was dissociation is because if it was dissociation, I wouldn't be able to remember, and I do remember. In fact, I don't want to forget. But the most fundamental reason why I don't believe it's dissociation is because what woke up in me that day was extremely profound empathy. It's not that I didn't have empathy before, but the levels of empathy that woke up in me made me realize that what happened before, or the life I was living before, I was simply floundering around like a zombie. I wasn't present. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't see people. I didn't feel them. And to the point that after ayahuasca, suddenly plot lines and movies started to make sense. And I believe that what happened in me the day I engaged with ayahuasca is that consciousness woke up in me. Consciousness woke up in me. And I realized that before ayahuasca, I was pretty much going through the motions of life, floundering around without actually experiencing it. And it's brought me to a realization that what I actually think has happened is that I've reincarnated within my own body. And this made sense when I spoke to a friend of mine who's a shaman, and he said to me that this is actually something that's possible, that in many Eastern faiths they actually believe that this is something that can happen to you in this lifetime, that you can reincarnate within your own body. And I believe that when we work with plant medicines or any extremely transformative spiritual experience, that we can reincarnate with our own body. And it's not that I'm disconnected from the previous versions of myself, but I can stand back and observe them. And I know that I'm no longer that person. And I do believe that this is one of the gifts of ayahuasca. And in fact, I believe that it's happened to me on a number of occasions since, to the point that the person that was standing in front of you 5 years ago is not the person that was standing in front of you 3 years ago, and is actually not even the person that was standing in front of you 2 months ago, because I've recently gone through a very profound initiation. As a child, I was exposed to various forms of Christianity, various dogmatic forms of Christianity, which traumatized me quite a lot, I have to be honest. Because I was exposed to an interpretation of Christianity that I found to be cold, controlling, and very devoid of spirit. And it's only in the recent years that I've managed to really open my heart to Christianity, and I really do believe that Jesus is a master. And I mean absolutely no offense to any Christians, but I don't believe that I will ever identify with myself as a Christian, because I've opened my heart to all faiths now. And I do feel that many of us in this room have probably very possibly been traumatized by a faith that's been forced upon us by society too. But what I have come to realize is that I do believe the experience of being born again is a completely valid one. And I think that we're very judgmental when we look at this experience of being born again. But what it means to be born again is to slay oneself on the altar of spirit. And spirit does not discriminate. Because when we slay oneself on the altar of spirit, what happens is we surrender to love, and spirit is bigger than that. And when we do so, these transformative spiritual experiences take place. And it's the stories we tell ourselves and the constructs that we create that separate us from one another. And we need to start letting go of those stories. Spirit is so much bigger than that. And redemption is always accessible to all of us. And it takes place whenever we give ourselves the license to let go of our suffering. And we give ourselves the license to forgive ourselves. When we surrender to love, when we surrender to spirit. Ironically, it often happens when you hit rock bottom. Have you ever found that? And when you hit rock bottom, there's nowhere else to go except to forgive yourself, to surrender to love. Redemption is always there. It's always waiting for us. And it's not limited to certain specific spiritual pathways. And it's definitely one of the gifts of ayahuasca. But it's available through many, many paths. So what I'd like to talk about now is initiations. Because what I'm seeing more and more, and what I really do believe, is that initiations, we're being presented with initiations constantly. And initiations always require a death of the old, so that the new can be born in us. And the opportunities for us to shift out of the old and into the new. And we are being presented with them constantly. It's not just shamans who go through initiations. Each and every one of us is constantly being asked to surrender, to let go of the old, to let the old die so that the new can be born. And unfortunately, what's happened is in Western society, we have lost the knowledge, that tribal knowledge of initiations. And a consequence of failed initiation is disease and illness. So what happens is we get stuck because we fail to understand that what we're actually going through is initiation. So I'm going to start by talking about some of the major initiations that you'll definitely recognize. That understand that you are constantly being asked to initiate, to surrender, to let go of the old so that the new can be birthed in you. Now this information comes from Alberto Villoldo's book, Illumination. So Alberto Villoldo is a Cuban psychologist and shaman. And this is an extract from his book, and he talks about the consequences of failed initiation. And he talks about the demon of each initiation and the angel of each initiation. So the negative and the positive, the virtue that will help you move into the positive. So the first initiation, which I think you'll see just from what I've spoken about so far, you can see very clearly that this was one that I was stuck on for many years. So I failed to initiate successfully into the experience of birth. So birth, if you fail to initiate successfully into birth, you'll struggle with a sense of belonging in this world, a sense of self-worth, and you'll feel anger. Huh? See me? Huh? Yeah. So the demon of it, the consequence of the failed initiation of birth is wrath, and it's healed by peace. The angel is peace. And then we initiate into manhood or womanhood. And the failed initiation of, the consequences of failed initiation here would be narcissism and feeling resentment about what it is you lack, being obsessed by materialism and power. So the demon would be greed, which is healed by generosity. First love, The consequences of a failed initiation here would be constant searching, feeling lonely and incomplete, and unable to surrender to sexual intimacy. So the demon is lust, which is healed by purity of intent. Marriage. If you fail this initiation, you'll experience an ambivalence about relationships. You'll expect your partner to meet all your needs. You'll be unwilling to do the work to create a genuine partnership. So the demon is sloth, which is healed by courage. Parenthood. And parenthood, I must stress, does not apply just to having a child. It's not necessarily having a child. It can also be giving birth to a project or a career. So the consequences of failed initiation here would be your tendency to live your life through your child or your project. See, workaholism here. Obsessing about outcomes and being envious of others who have more options, or even your own child who has more options than you. So the demon is envy, which is healed by compassion. And then we have sagehood. So when you come into your wisdom, sagehood. And the consequence of failed initiation here is feeling crippled by scarcity and loss, and the desire to regain what is no more, to consume more than you need to in order to feel better. And I think you can see that we can hit this at any point. So the demon here is gluttony, which is healed by temperance. And then the great crossing, which is death. So we've been asked to initiate into death before we even die. So the consequence of failed initiation here is clinging to unfinished business, feeling arrogant and self-important, and terrified of one's own mortality. So the demon here is pride, which is healed by humility. Now those are some of the major initiations, but don't think that that's all. Every moment you've been asked to initiate into a truer version of yourself. And the thing about initiations is this, and I'm speaking from experience here, so initiations always require the old to fall away. So something in you has to die. Something in you has to die. Initiations require you to make a sacrifice on the altar, and the sacrifice is you. The sacrifice is you. And that's scary for us because obviously the ego does not like to die, does it? And the ego is what causes us suffering because the ego is attached to its current state and clings onto that and resists. And we buckle down and go, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. And that's why we get stuck, and that's why we suffer illness and disease. But alchemy, gold is forged when it goes into the fire, and we have to burn. So something has to die. So initiations, we are on the path of the phoenix. So we have to die. And like the phoenix, you will rise from the ashes, rebuilt, reforged, and stronger, and in true alignment with who you are, what your path is, new direction. And that is the gift of each initiation. And when you're struggling in life, when things aren't flowing, you need to ask yourself, what is it in you that is needing to die? What is in you that is calling to be let go of? What is it in you that needs to surrender? Spirit's always asking us to surrender. But the ego holds on to our emotional dramas, our stories, the things that we're playing out. And it's like standing at the precipice and needing to jump. But we don't want to jump. But yet when we do, we discover that we've got wings because Spirit catches us. We fall into the arms of grace. We fall into love. But we have to jump. And if only we could surrender more gracefully, then we would save ourselves so much suffering. Because it's not the initiation that's painful. It's our resistance. It's our resistance to these initiations that we're constantly being presented with. And in order to go through these initiations, interestingly enough, they often involve a purge. Now, those of you that have worked with ayahuasca definitely know all about purging. And purges can take place in different forms. So if you've worked with ayahuasca, you know that you can purge by vomiting in a bucket. Or maybe you need to release your bowels or empty your bladder. And some purges can take place by yawning. Or some lucky people can laugh. Those are the lucky ones. Or maybe you cry. And ironically, it's the physical purges that are the easier ones. But it's those heart purges, those heart purges, those heavy heart purges, those are the ones that hurt us so much. But yet, what catharsis purging brings, and the only way we can reach that catharsis is by feeling it deeply so that we can release that emotion. And purges, very important to understand, is purging doesn't only take place in a ceremony. Because what is the real ceremony here? Life. Life is the ceremony. And as Westerners, we don't like purging very much because we don't like feeling things very much. We've become a society that is not only spiritually and emotionally anal retentive, but purge adversive. And when we start feeling a purge coming on, what do? We medicate. So maybe we take some psychiatric medication, or maybe we distract ourselves with alcohol, drugs, sex, our cell phones, television, relationships. Because we've been told that if we don't feel good, then there must be something wrong with us. Instead of feeling it in order to move through it. Because the only way through, people, is through. And so what's happened is we are putting a lid on a pressure cooker, and society has become one giant pressure cooker that is overheating. So purging is necessary for us to let go, but in order to purge, we have to feel it deeply. These experiences of letting go, of surrendering, move us and have moved me deeper and deeper to a place of non-attachment, which I must stress is very different and not to be confused with detachment. And from a place of non-attachment, I'm able to look back upon the previous versions of myself. I'm able to look back upon my stories, upon the identity that I held onto, and realize that I've got less and less investment in it. And I'm finding that what is happening is I'm becoming less and less of me, but what I am becoming is truly who I am. And what I am is more than I ever imagined. And what I'm finding inside me is a stillness, a presence that's completely surrendered to existence. What I'm finding inside me is pure consciousness. And if we're honest with ourselves, our fear of death and our quest for immortality has to do with our quest to preserve our ego, our identity. That very aspect of ourselves that separates us from one another, that causes us to move through this world as separate beings. And it's this identity which is an illusion, really. And it's this identity which is the cause of all our suffering, which causes us to play out all of our dramas in this 3D world. And why would I want to spend eternity with my ego, in all honesty? Because seriously, that would be hell. So as I find my identity falling away, and there's less and less of me, but I'm finding that there's more and more of me, and that is pure consciousness, and it's the same thing inside me, which is the same thing that's inside you, and that's what we call oneness. And that is our connection to the divine, because it is divine, and that thing is eternal. And so it is, I'm understanding more and more what it is and what I believe it means to die, to let go of the idea of me, to let go of my stories, my expectations, my ideas of how things should look, all the striving, all the clinging, and to simply embrace this experience of existence completely. And the more I do so, the more I surrender, the more I can say that I love me. Because what I am, what I'm discovering is my true nature is love, as it is yours. And what is there not to love? From my flabby thighs to my stretch marks to my wrinkles, I am perfectly flawed in my experience of being human. And why is it that we can look at any other creature on this planet, any other animal, and go, it's so perfect, but we can't do that for ourselves, and we can't do it for one another? Why is that? I exist. What a gift that is. Embrace this experience. And as I surrender to existence and I surrender to this experience, I surrender to all of it. There is nothing to fear when there is love. To love this experience, to love life in whatever shape or form it presents itself to you. Whatever arises, to love that. Whatever is, to love that too. And to be able to say, what a beautiful journey it has been. What a beautiful journey it has been. And so I let go of me. It is after me. It is after all me, my identity, my ego, and the games I play because I'm unable to love myself enough that is causing me my suffering. And so I rather choose to access that place of stillness inside me, that place where I can find the love that I really need, which is the source of presence, the place of pure consciousness, the source of my complete bliss and fulfillment, the part of me that is connected to everything, the divine. And in a place of complete silence, that is where we meet the divine. And this is what it means to be present. This is the place where we rest. This is the no thing, the nothing that is everything, and the everything that is nothing, where time itself does not exist. The void where we can take our suffering and let it dissolve, where we can take a huge cosmic sigh and let it all go and let God. I do not believe that death is anything to fear. It is the ultimate surrender, the final initiation. And from what I know of initiations, what usually follows is rebirth. I'm not afraid of death, because a part of me that will die is the part of me that is my teacher, but yet it's also the part of me that's causing me suffering. And the more and more I go on this journey, what I'm finding inside me is something so much bigger. And it's the same thing that's inside you. And that is consciousness, which I believe is eternal. So I'd like to talk about the ayahuasca ceremony, because I do believe the ayahuasca ceremony is a microcosm of the experience of life itself. And during an ayahuasca ceremony, what happens is we get taken through various experiences that are designed to teach us how to navigate this experience. So we're faced with certain difficulties, we face our ego, and in order to surrender to the medicine, we have to surrender. And we may purge, we may go into labor, we may give birth, we may discover illusions, we come to certain realizations, we may die, we may experience redemption and grace. We let go, we crack open to love and compassion, and we most definitely receive some upgrades. And I'd like to talk about human personality, because I believe that you can relate human personality to a computer operating system. And it makes sense because we've designed computers in our own image. And I'd like you to think of our deep core truths as our binary code. And and from these truths, our patterns guide our thoughts, our behaviors, and our attitudes. Humans. So the word documents are your stories, your dramas, your emotional attachments. That's the ego in action. And the problem is that we get buggy. You might be running Windows version 4 when you should be on Windows version 11. And we need to go into the binary code. But the problem is that we're spending far too much time messing around in the Word documents. And I do believe that ayahuasca, plant medicines, and any spiritual path such as meditation that allows you to sit in the position of higher self, allows you to observe your binary code and do some editing. And it's important to focus on those core truths and not get caught up in the stories, the dramas, the emotional attachments. And that is how we shift quickly. But the problem is we're too busy messing around in the emotional dramas, the stories, the products of the ego, the games that the ego wants to play. So we need to step out of it, become the observer, and go into the binary code. And that's something that ayahuasca is very good at. It's something meditation is very good at. It's something dropping into silence and presence will enable you to do. Something we need to practice more of. To find that space, to be silent, to be present, and to become the observer. Detach yourself from your stories and go into the core truths. And something that gets buggy in us is our ability to create. And I'd like to talk about this, our ability to create and manifest. And for all of you in this community, your ability to create abundance is crucial. Now, I've been running a business for the last 4 years using energy alone. And if I can do it, so can you. And I don't believe it's about the law of attraction. I believe it's about the law of creation. So what happens is our binary code gets buggy. What you believe you deserve, you're going to get. What you believe you are worth, you're going to get. There's a beautiful tantric scripture that says, what Shiva wants, Shiva gets. Now, who is it do you think that Shiva is? The Incans have a beautiful story, and they say that in the beginning of time, this being known as God decided to experience itself through its multitude of forms, such as blades of grass and trees and oceans and whales and dolphins and buffalo and human beings. And that we've got a 9th chakra above our heads. And the purpose of that chakra is this chakra is the keeper of secrets. And the secret that it keeps is the remembrance of who you are. Because in order to have these experiences, God had to forget who it was. So who are you? What Shiva wants, Shiva gets. Now you might think, I'm not creating this shit. Why would I want this in my life? But when that message starts to really drop in, you realize that on some level you do want that. And then you need to start going into your beliefs about your self-worth and change them. We need to do some binary code editing. And when you drop into that, you'll see how your ability to create dramatically changes. What Shiva wants, Shiva gets. So this is a very multi-layered journey, one that I really challenge you to explore, and it's going to unfold and unfold and unfold for you. But the truth is that that is all that you really need to know about creating abundance. And I challenge you to embark upon this journey. So going back to the matrix. In the beginning, our experiences with plant medicine, we focus mainly upon ourselves and we purge out a lot of stuff that's our own because we've got a lot of clearing out to do. And for some of us very quickly, and some of us it might take a bit longer, but soon we find ourselves purging out stuff that's society's as well. And I do believe that in a ceremony we form a CPU, processing on behalf of a greater whole. And we find ourselves purging out stuff that we say is not ours. But this is not true. It is. It is ours. For the greatest mistake we make is to believe that we are not connected. The chaos and darkness within society can be felt by all. And society is going through a collective purge. And because we are all so connected, you are going to feel it too. And it hurts. I know that it hurts. But we have to feel it deeply in order to move through it. There is suffering on this planet, and there is healing to be done. And everyone working with plant medicines and anyone awakening on a spiritual path is essentially already a healer, because you are here to hold light so that others can see you and remember their own. You are all here to be healers by shining the light within you, by being living examples of love, so that you may touch others, so that they too can remember who they are. It's time for the suffering to stop. It's time for the suffering to end now. It's time to stop playing the same old game. It's time for a new way of being. A collective purge is taking place right now. And society is like a vortex of energy that's spinning, and it needs a new song to be sung to usher in a feminine energy, a mothering energy, an energy of love. And this is what the Incans have predicted is happening in this very age. This is the age of Aquarius. It's time for a new song to be sung, a returning to love. And this song needs all of our voices to sing it. And it's time for your voices to be heard. And this song has to be sung by everyone who's got a voice to sing. And this we know. We know how important this is. And no man and no woman is an island. And we can fool ourselves. And we can think that we can get through this experience of life alone. But we know that if we're honest with ourselves, that things are going to get harder, things are going to get worse, and that we are going to get older. And the only way that we can make a difference is that if we do it together. And so it's time for us to turn to one another in love. Time to drop all the bullshit, all the stuff that's separating us from one another, and to just stop and pause, and to make a decision to do something new. And that's all that it takes, to stop and pause, because we're all so tired of the suffering, because we are the creators, and this is our gift, and this is the medicine that is within you. And even if you haven't worked with the medicine yet, you are part of a community that has been activated into elevated states of consciousness because of their engagement with this medicine. It's time for a new song to be sung, to embrace the medicine of love, to embrace yourself with love, to embrace one another with love. And this may sound like a bit of a sermon, but it's not. It's words that need to be said. And they need to be said by someone. In fact, they need to be said by everyone. And I don't think there's one person in this room who can disagree. In fact, I don't think there's one person in this room who honestly doesn't agree or disagree that this work is not for you. Because we've got the power to be the change that we want to see in the world. Because what else is the point of working with this incredibly sacred medicine? What is the point? This is what we've signed up for. And yes, we've signed up for healing. Or maybe you might feel that you haven't signed up for healing. Maybe you just wanted to see some cool shit. Maybe you just wanted to see some dragons. But the truth is that we're here because we need healing. And we need healing because we are in forgetfulness of who it is we are and what we are. And as a result, our planet needs healing. And there isn't a single being on this planet that doesn't need healing, because even if you're not physically sick, it doesn't mean that you're not spiritually sick. And until your heart cracks open with love and compassion, and until you realize that you are complete, you need healing. And this is the healing we need to return to our true nature, which is love. And yes, you might want to say that this is not what you signed up for. It feels too much. You don't know what you can possibly do for the greater whole. For society, for our country, for our planet, this isn't what you signed up for. And it feels so much easier to just walk away from it, to distract yourself. And the distracting of oneself, well, that's actually the illness that society is afflicted with right now. And the problem is that when we distract ourselves from the lives that we should really be living. Lives that when we are in alignment, are filled with magic, with joy, with bliss, with gifts beyond your imagining, because there is nothing more fulfilling than being connected to the divine. And there are consequences for walking away. Depression means to depress, and like a champagne bottle that has been shaken, eventually something is going to pop. So we can keep distracting ourselves, but it hasn't been working for us, and it's not working, is it? So let's choose something different instead. Let's choose to take the bull by the horns and say, let's do this thing. Let's do this thing. Because it's more the action of taking the bull by the horns than the actual bull that we're afraid of, let's be honest. And we're afraid because we think, will we be strong enough? Can we do it? Well, you can't do it alone. But together we can. Together we can do this thing. Because at the end of the day, would you rather go through life living a mediocre existence? And the truth is that it's not a mediocre existence. It's actually a life of suffering. Or would you choose to would you rather choose to stand up and do something meaningful instead? Because when we choose to stand up, we choose ourselves. And when we choose to stand up, we don't choose suffering. In fact, we choose to end it. So don't resist it, feel it. Because you're strong enough to do this work. If you weren't, you wouldn't be here. Be brave enough to be vulnerable and allow your heart to crack open with love and compassion. Allow yourself to crack open. Because when you do so, you show others how to do so too. And this is our medicine for the world. And so how do we take the medicine of these sacred teacher plants? How do we take the medicine of spirit? Because spirit is essentially what you're being served. How do we take this medicine forward into the world? Well, we take it forward by turning to one another in love. But we can only do so when we truly love ourselves first. By loving ourselves completely, deeply, and relentlessly, that is how we heal. And inside each and every one of us, there is a wounded child that requires us to be our own divine parents to ourselves, our own best friends and our own lovers, so that we can become complete and stop acting out our dramas in the 3D world. And as we embrace and love ourselves, we bring into light our own darkness. And then we are able to shift it. And then we're able to engage unconditionally in complete and utter love. And each and every other human being in this world has their own wounded child that moves and hurts in response to your wounded child. And the only way we can move through this world complete is by healing ourselves first. And the truth is that everything we've ever needed is inside ourselves, and everything we've ever needed only we can give ourselves. Because when we seek external affirmations, the truth is that they're empty and fleeting. So we have the love that we've always needed inside us, and only we can heal us. And when we are complete, we no longer present our needs upon others. And so we expand in love, and the more we expand in love inside ourselves, so too are we able to love the world and everything in it. And so as we increase our ability to truly love, to love unconditionally, and we find the love inside ourselves that we need to heal, and we show others the same, and the love that we need to heal inside ourselves is within each and every one of you. It's been waiting there all along. And it's not something that you have to look for. The biggest lie you've ever been told is that God is something that you have to seek. That God is something external to yourselves. Because all you've ever had to do is go inside. Because the very thing that you're made of is divine. The very thing you're made of is divine. And so what is the ultimate goal of working with sacred medicines? What is the ultimate goal of working with plant teachers? Because it feels that plant medicines, like so many healing practices, are being used more and more as a modality and less as a tool. And both healers and participants are losing sight of the end goal. The point of working with plant medicines, or any spiritual practice for that point, is to connect you to the divine. And once you have found it inside yourself, it's not for you to become dependent upon the plant, but for you to come to certain realizations that enable you to access that again and again whenever you choose to. It is here, right now. It is the breath that I'm breathing. It is the floor that I'm standing on. It is this room around us. It is inside you. It is inside me. It is me. It is you. And all that you need to do to access it is to just take a breath and drop into your heart. It is a stillness inside you. It is that place of complete presence. It has always been there. And as you drop inside that place of stillness, just understand that it is pure, unconditional love. This is the new song that needs to be sung. The new song that needs your voice. And let us sing it together. And know that love has already won. We have a song to sing to wake up our brothers and sisters as we turn to each other in love. Life is so incredibly precious. Life is so incredibly beautiful. You are so incredibly precious. You are so incredibly beautiful. Love your life. Love yourself. Love each other. Love this planet. Our medicine for this country is to teach love by becoming love. And each and every one of you in this room is a healer, because you are here to take love into this world by becoming love. And this is how we will change everything.